Can I just start by asking you first, are you glad to see that the prediction markets executives are not included in this White House meeting, in this innovation advisory group?
Well, Kaylee, thanks for having me on. I wonder why they ever were, why President Trump would ever want to sit with these folks who now have been found to be operating illegally in states all over this country. They've lost 85% of the court cases that have been brought against them. So, the fact is that these are folks that are not going to contribute to the conversation, the potential success of the crypto legislation they're trying to get through. They're a drag on it. And I don't know why, between that and the president's teleprompter scandal, that all was predicated on stuff that was on these markets. I don't know why he'd want them there in the first place, and I'm glad he decided not to have them there.
And before we talk more about this, I just want to mention the breaking news just crossing the Bloomberg terminal as we are considering a deal on trade between the U.S. and Canada. People familiar with the matter now telling Bloomberg that the U.S. is set to cut in half the tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum as part of this trade deal, though they caution that that deal is still not yet finalized. We'll continue to track that for you here on Bloomberg. I'm sure there are bets somewhere out there on Kalshi or Polymarket, Governor, about whether or not there will be a trade deal between the U.S. and Canada. To your point on what we saw with the teleprompter operator, you could point to the member of the United States military that was involved in the raid in Venezuela and was able to reap financial reward on that before he faced charges. When we think about issues like that, is that actually lending to the argument that maybe you do need to see federal oversight over these markets and who can do what, how they can operate, rather than it being on a state-by-state basis? Is the CFTC actually the right party to handle this?
They're absolutely the wrong party to handle it. And here's why. First off, any of these other issues that we've just talked about, while they're serious as individual cases, they're a distraction, Kaylee, because between 80 to 90% of what the predictions markets do is sports betting. And they are sports books. That's what they are. And these other things are a distraction that allow them to make an argument. But in the end, these are the folks who, as we're getting ready to send our kids back to college, they market directly to college students and call what they do investments. Well, a bet on the NFL is not an investment. And so while these other things, as individual things, the teleprompter case or the military matter, are serious individual cases, that's not why Kalshi, Polymarket, and others are in business. They're in business because 80 to 90% of their business comes from sports betting. They're sports books that are regularly evading state regulation. And they've been found to be operating illegally in many states. In fact, they're operating in a state like Texas, who doesn't allow sports betting of any kind. So these are illegal actors, and this other stuff, while important for those individuals, is a distraction to the overall issue, in my view.
Well, of course, you're familiar with the legal fight over sports betting and getting more states to allow it. That fight went all the way to the Supreme Court. And I wonder if you expect this one to as well. And given the court's current composition, if you feel like the court would actually be on your side on this one.
Look, I was the person who bought Christie versus the NCAA, which established the right for states to permit sports gambling if they chose to do so. That was a 6-year fight. I think this one will be shorter. And I believe when you look at it, 85% now, Kaylee, of the cases, as I said before, that have been brought, the prediction markets have lost. And I don't expect that losing streak will do anything but continue if they go up to the United States Supreme Court on this. And if that's what the states need to do, that's what they should do. Because let's face it, they've already cost the states $1.3 billion in revenue, in tax revenue, that would have come otherwise to the states, that's being siphoned off by the activities of these prediction markets. That's serious business in these states. I can tell you as a governor, losing big revenue like that means either programs have to be cut or other taxes have to be increased. And that's only happening because of the selfishness and the illegal conduct of these markets.
I'd like to talk, Governor, if we can, about another issue that could end up before the Supreme Court. It's the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, told me this week that she'd be willing to take it that far. It's this fight over the DOJ trying to get access to states' voter rolls. And she pointed specifically to the state of New Jersey. Of course, the current governor, Mikey Sherrill, disclosing that there had been thousands of individuals misregistered as citizens and therefore as potential voters in New Jersey's systems. And this got to the overall question of non-citizens voting. This is what Harmeet Dillon told me, Governor, and then I'll have you respond.
Sure. I think the scope is actually much larger of non-citizen voting. And these are people who flagged themselves, according to New Jersey, hi, I'm not a citizen. And then they went ahead and voted. And so we don't know the scale of this problem because 2/3 of the states are refusing to cooperate with the Department of Justice's efforts. We would love for all the states to cooperate with us. But in the states that have cooperated with us, there are hundreds of thousands of dead people on the voter rolls, and there are tens of thousands of people who are not citizens on the voter rolls.
And I'm wondering, Governor, if you saw evidence of this in terms of non-citizen voting activity while you were leading the state of New Jersey. And if you were still there in the governor's mansion, would you be cooperating with the DOJ on this?
Well, a few things. First off, no, because the system that has helped to create this problem, where people are automatically registered to vote when they go to get a driver's license in the state, didn't happen when I was governor for two reasons. One, I didn't let non-citizens get driver's licenses when I was governor. And two, we didn't permit that type of automatic registration to vote. And the reasons at the time that I stated were because you could have errors like what's happened here in New Jersey subsequently when those laws were permitted. So I think they were bad decisions by my successor, Governor Murphy, and I think Governor Sherrill is now paying the price for it. I think the good news is that Governor Sherrill has hired my former Attorney General and former United States Senator Jeff Chiesa, a Republican, to lead the investigation in the state into whether there are more people who are non-citizens who are registered to vote and to fix the problem. And I have complete confidence in Senator Chiesa that he'll lead that investigation with integrity and honesty and disclose it. But I am also, as a former governor, very jealous about the rights of the states on voting. These are not federal issues, Kayleigh. This is for the states to take care of. And I don't think the DOJ should be involved in the middle of this. And I don't know what their motivation really is outside of political. In the end, the states should be doing this themselves. We did it when I was governor. And I trust that Senator Chiesa, now being brought on board by Governor Sherrill, will expose all this information to the public. And then the governor and the legislature will have to figure out how to fix it. But this won't be in the dark anymore. I guarantee you that Jeff Chiesa will bring it to light.
Well, to your point, Governor, on states being in charge of their own elections, it's not just the pursuit of voter information from the DOJ. They're also sending, according to Harmeet Dillon, or preparing to 1,000 election monitors across the country to different voting locations for these midterms. And I know you said you don't know exactly what the motivations are, but do you suspect that this could be gearing up all towards something that could be contesting the results of November?
Well, one never knows, Kayleigh, what could happen in that regard. But I will tell you this, there will be a fight over those monitors being at state polling places as well, because they've got to articulate a reason, a civil rights reason, why to have those folks there. And I can tell you, I don't see what that civil rights reason is. The DOJ will have to articulate it, because I guarantee you if they try to send in monitors into individual states, and whether they're red or blue states, it doesn't matter. Governors want to run their elections, not turn it over to the federal government. And quite frankly, whether it's been a Republican or a Democratic president over the last number of years, do we really think somehow the federal government would run elections better than state governments? I don't think so. And I think there'll be fights about that as well.
Well, speaking of a fight, not over the vote and the voting systems, but over an issue that people will be thinking about, I would imagine, when they go to vote, data centers, the NIMBY issue of this cycle, Governor, they seem to be. We're seeing more governors, including Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania just yesterday, taking action to regulate them, put restrictions around them. Others, like Kathy Hochul, have resorted to just a flat-out moratorium. As someone who was a state executive, you've run a state, how would you be thinking about the data center issue right now? How do you balance the potential economic opportunity they present with the challenges communities think they might face because of them?
Well, let's call the data center issue what it is. It's an energy issue, Kaylee. That's what it is, because they use enormous amounts of energy. And in my state, for instance, energy costs, electric costs are through the roof. And they were the single biggest issue in the last gubernatorial race here in New Jersey. And the current governor is still struggling to try to deal with it. And as someone who receives an electric bill every month for my home, doesn't seem any better to me at the moment. And so what people are really worried about here is that if they're going to be data centers, that they need to pay for the electricity they're going to consume, and be able to do it in a way that it doesn't affect negatively the market for homeowners and other small businesses, and see their rates go up. And so that's really the issue here, more than anything else, is electricity and the use of electricity in those places. And so what we need to do is to figure out a way how the people who will be making a profit off these data centers, those companies, need to make sure that they absorb the costs that they put on these communities. And secondly, we can't walk away from the idea that there is going to be economic development and job creation by these. But as a governor, what I would attempt to do is make sure that the people who are creating these new market conditions, which could raise costs for homeowners and small businesses, that they pay to bring those costs down. And if you want to operate in a state, you need to bring those costs down. And then that helps to create that opportunity, will then create jobs, which will be good for the state and good for its citizens. But you can't just have the job creation and let electricity prices go through the roof, because if you do, that's going to harm small business, and that's going to harm regular citizens who are trying to heat or cool their homes. Those prices are already too high because of a whole bunch of things, including the war in Iran and some of the infrastructure problems we have in this country. So as a governor, what I would be doing is trying to make sure those responsible keep the market where it is, or even lower, for homeowners and small businesses.